how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
So how did this idea came into being?
So the idea of Ixigo came from the pain of the founders themselves. We used to travel a lot. We used to live in Europe before we came back to India to start Ixigo.
Oh, okay.
And one of the pain areas we always had when we were trying to look for tickets for flights or book hotel room nights was that we would go from one website to another,
Exactly.
do the same search over and over again. And then write down the prices, compare.
Exactly.
So planning a trip was really very difficult.
Looking at the flight timings, comparing,
going to the airline side, then going to the online travel portals, then comparing the same fare over and over again. And we figured out why hasn't somebody built a comparison site where you can plug and play inventory from all these places and just within a few seconds just look at prices as well as availability from multiple providers and then decide where you want to book. So that's how we came up with the idea of Ixigo, and we launched for flights in 2007, and then from there on added more verticals along the journey.
Okay, so of course you have other big players too in the market, or maybe the traditional players. So how is Exigo different from them? Like what makes Exigo special?
Sure. I think most of the other players in the market are online travel agencies or portals that actually take bookings on your behalf, right? So they are intermediaries. They essentially end up owning the transaction, and their pricing for hotels, for the stuff that they sell, essentially is dependent on their deals and their commercials that they have with their suppliers, right? Which is why you will see different travel portals having different prices for the same inventory. Our model is slightly different. We are not the merchant. We are not the sellers of any inventory. The sellers are the ones who we work with. So most of the other portals that we are talking about there are partners and not really our competitors from that perspective. So we are unique in terms of positioning. We are trying to create a blue ocean essentially, where we say that we work with all these guys, we help consumers compare, and then when you go through us to them and you actually transact, that's how we also make money.
So tell us something about your marketing strategy, or how are you using social media for the promotion? Like I have seen your multiple videos which are like amazing. Then there is something called Ixigo Inspire, which is really trending. So how are you planning to do that?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're really proud about is that we've been quite innovative in terms of trying to market without spending a lot of marketing dollars. It's also by virtue of the fact that in 2008-9 we went through a very hard time where we barely survived as a business, and we were forced to think of ways in which we could market without spending any money because we didn't have any money to spend. What that meant was that we were in the process creating a DNA of the company where people experiment and come up with ideas which can help propel word of mouth faster. One of those ideas was Ixigo Inspire, where we said, guess what, none of the travel sites today actually care about inspiring you to travel, telling you more about places you haven't seen, or showing you visuals of places that you should be going to. And we said, why not create a Chrome plugin, which basically inspires you with every new tab that you open, because that's an activity people do hundreds of times a day, right? Because travel is it's an activity with high emotional involvement, right? It's not just buying a ticket. It's actually about planning the entire trip, making decisions about where you want to spend your time. If you're going with your family, there are certain constraints that you have to again look for. So trip planning in general is a very time consuming exercise. It's also a very high emotional involvement exercise.
When people are spending more on travel, and now traveling almost becoming like an industry, so how is Ixigo making a difference to this industry?
It's a great question. I think, look, travel and tourism combined has always been a very large industry, right? I think if I remember the stats, it employs more than 10% of the population, right? I feel that our contribution is on both sides. So on the supplier side, where we work with airlines or hotel chains, our proposition is very simple, that in the world of the future, there is very limited scope for an agent to add value to the transaction. And we think that when you have technology that can connect the supplier directly to the consumer using the internet, then there is no real role of an intermediary, which is how we started, right? So I think And they love that because there is no intermediation cost for them. It's not like you have to pay very heavy commissions to be on Ixigo. It's one of the most cost-effective medium for our partners.
So you have launched several apps and you have an unbundled app strategy. So how are you doing on it?
Yeah, I think the way we look at apps is that every single app needs to solve a use case very well, right? Because whenever we think of any one use case, we always think of one or two apps on our phone that will solve that. So back in 2013, we took a call that instead of having one bundled heavy app, we would split it up into components that made more sense for a certain subset of users. So if you look at the trains app as an example, a lot of people in India travel only by trains and they do not even care about traveling by flights because maybe they can't afford it, or where they live it's not well connected by air. In fact, that's a majority of the population, probably 80-85% of the population only wants to travel by train. So they would prefer a very sharp focused train app which solves their needs, like finding where their train is, what the platform number is, whether their PNR will confirm or not, and all information that any train traveler wants. Where's my coach, which platform is my train coming on. So we just bundled all those use cases in one app and called it Ixigo Trains. The moment we unbundled it, it just shot through the roof because that's exactly what people wanted, like an app that solves the train pain areas. And now we have more than 7 million downloads on that one. Recently we launched a cabs app which basically aggregates all the cab aggregators as well as the cab vendors for both intra-city as well as intercity. And again, that's a use case which on its own is sort of growing, should be reaching 1 million plus downloads within the next 2-3 months, already at about 700K downloads. So I think by focusing on pain areas which are very specific to a vertical within travel, we've been able to align both our marketing and technology teams to just try to solve for that user. And therefore the user finds it more relevant. He's more likely to retain that app on his phone as opposed to a generic app which after a while you even forget what the second or third use case of that app is. You only remember the core use case, right? And I think that's the philosophy that will continue going forward.